Let's dive into the mystery and uncover what really happened to the Dyatlov 9 that night. It began like any other adventure, but ended as one of the most terrifying mysteries in history. January 23, 1959. Laughing, taking photos, excited for the journey ahead. But what they don't know is that most of them will never return. 10 young hikers set out into the frozen wilderness, unaware that they were walking into a nightmare. Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader, meticulously planned every detail. This was supposed to be a challenging but thrilling expedition, 230 miles through the Ural Mountains, a test of endurance, skill, and survival. The team, bright, ambitious, experienced. University students and graduates, drawn together by their love for adventure. Their bond was unbreakable, or so they thought. Igor Dyatlov, the determined leader. Yuri Doroshenko, fearless and strong. Lyudmila Dubinina, tough and outspoken. Yuri Krivonishenko, the group's joker. Alexander Kolovatov, the quiet intellect. Zinaida Kolmogorova, adventurous and kind. Rustem Slobodin, athletic and resilient. Nicholas Thibault Brignol, the engineer. Semyon Zolotaryov, the mysterious outsider. Yuri Yudin, the lucky survivor. Plagued by illness, would turn back, unaware that his sickness had just saved his life. While the early part of the hike may have been manageable and even enjoyable, the deeper they went, the more challenging and dangerous it became. They push forward through the Ural mountain terrain. The climb becomes harder, the weather turns brutal, and the temperatures plummet below freezing. But they don't turn back. February 1st, they reach Kholat Syakhl, translated from the Mansi language as Dead Mountain. It's here they make a fateful decision, one that seals their fate. Instead of retreating to safer ground, they set up their tent on the mountainside, exposed to the full wrath of the elements. And then, something happens. That night, something came for them, and by morning, they were gone. Their evening started like any other. Diaries reveal the hikers ate their last meal inside the tent, laughing, unaware that these would be their final moments together. Then something happened. Something so terrifying, so immediate, that it forced 9 experienced hikers to abandon their only shelter, without even taking their boots or warm clothing. The evidence is clear. They cut their way out from the inside. But why? Were they escaping an intruder? Or were they running from something no one would ever believe? One man should have been with them that night, but fate had other plans. Yuri Yudin, the 10th member of the Dyatlov team. He fell ill and turned back, never knowing that this simple twist of fate would save his life. Days passed, then weeks. No messages, no letters. Something was wrong, and Yuri Yudin knew it. If not for his insistence, the search might have started too late. But even Yuri wasn't prepared for what they would find. A rescue team, made up of experienced mountaineers and military personnel, was sent to search the frozen abyss. What they found was terrifying. The hikers fled barefoot into the frozen night, leaving food, gear, and warm clothing behind. But why? What horror drove them into the darkness of the Siberian wilderness? Then beneath a lone cedar tree, its branches broken and clawed, the first bodies are found. 2 hikers, half naked, their faces frozen in agony, their hands burned, bloodied, as if they had clawed at the bark in terror, desperately trying to climb, breaking branches. Were they running from something? Or were they desperately trying to survive the cold? A small fire pit nearby, but it had long burned out. Not far from the cedar tree, 3 more bodies are found. Their positions haunting. They are facing the direction of the tent, as if in a final desperate attempt to return. One frozen in a prayer-like pose, fists clenched against his chest. Another, his head bruised and battered. The last, his skull fractured, but with no sign of impact. Then 2 months later, the final 4 bodies are found, their corpses buried deep in a snow-filled ravine. And what rescuers discovered was beyond explanation. Crushed ribs, shattered skulls, missing eyes, a missing tongue. But worst of all, no external wounds, as if some unseen force had crushed them from the inside. And then, something even stranger. The jacket of Semyon Zolotaryov, found to contain traces of radiation. Alexander Kolovatov's clothing, also tested radioactive. Yuri Doroshenko's body was found frozen, discolored, and moved after death. His feet were bare, only covered by burnt wool socks. A desperate attempt at warmth, or something more sinister? Blood covered his ears, nose, and lips. A foamy gray fluid leaked from his cheek, a sign of fatal lung trauma. But what caused it? His chest showed signs of pressure, as if someone pinned him down. Soviet interrogation method? Or something unknown? He fell straight from a cedar tree. Was he escaping? Hiding? The official cause? Hypothermia. But does that explain the blood burns and pressure? Yuri Krivonoshenko's body was found half-dressed, barefoot, and frozen. His clothing? A long-sleeved checkered shirt, swimming pants, and long underpants, hardly enough to survive the brutal cold. A torn sock on his left foot. No footwear. Was it stripped away or left behind in a moment of panic? His cause of death? Hypothermia. But the details raise unsettling questions. Skin was found between his teeth. He had bitten his own hand. Was it an act of desperation? A futile attempt to stay conscious? Or was he stifling a cry in fear? His clothes were missing. Despite the horror, evidence suggests he was not in a state of panic. So why did he end up this way? Was it hypothermia or something far more disturbing? Igor Dyatlov, the leader, was found face up, his head turned toward the tent. His clenched fists emerged above the snow, frozen in time. His jacket was unbuttoned, his skin bluish red, a sign of extreme cold. Dried blood stained his lips. His knuckles were bruised, injuries common in hand-to-hand combat. But with no internal injuries, what was he fighting? The elements or something unseen? No footwear, just one cotton sock, one woolen sock. His wristwatch stopped at 5:31. The cause of death? Hypothermia. But his posture, bruises, and direction toward the tent suggest a desperate fight for survival. Zenaida Kolmogorova, found 630 meters from the cedar tree, her body frozen, skin purple-red from the cold. Unlike the others, she was better dressed, but it wasn't enough to save her. She wore 2 hats, a long-sleeve undershirt, a sweater, and a checkered shirt. But her sweater had a torn cuff. Was it ripped in a struggle, or a sign of her desperate fight against the elements? No shoes, just layers of clothing that weren't enough against the brutal night. Her cause of death? Hypothermia. But was she fleeing? Searching for help? Rustam Slobodin, found 480 meters from the cedar tree, face down, heading toward the tent. His body frozen in place, yet his injuries tell a different story. He was better dressed than some of the others. A long-sleeve undershirt, a sweater, 2 pairs of pants, and 4 pairs of socks. But only 1 boot on his right foot. His watch stopped at 8:45, a moment frozen in time. But it's what was found on his skull that raises the most questions. A fracture caused by a blunt object. The autopsy couldn't explain it. Did he fall repeatedly, hitting both sides of his head? Or was there another force at play? Despite his injuries, he was in better physical shape than the rest of the group. Yet his body fell when it was still relatively warm. Lyudmila Dubinina, her body found on a natural ledge, her injuries among the most disturbing in the Dyatlov Pass Incident. She was dressed warmly, 2 sweaters, 2 long-sleeve shirts. Her tongue was missing. Some reports claim it was ripped out, others say it was eaten, but the autopsy confirms it was removed while her heart was still beating. Inside her chest, massive internal injuries, multiple fractured ribs, internal bleeding, and a hemorrhage into the right atrium of her heart. Investigators also found 100 grams of dark brown mucosal mass, often labeled as coagulated blood. Her autopsy was less detailed than the others. Was it an oversight or something more? Was she a victim of the cold or something much, much darker? Semyon Zolotaryov, his body found inside the den, but unlike the others, he didn't die from the cold. He was well dressed, wearing 2 hats, a scarf, 2 shirts, a sweater, and a coat. His lower body protected with socks and a burqa. He was prepared, but for what? Around his neck, an unknown 5th camera. The film was damaged by water, But what was he trying to capture that night? He left the tent with his camera. But why? What did he see? What was so important that he risked his life to document it? In his hands, a pen and a small notepad. But when examined, he had written nothing. Even more suspicious, the notepad was never filed into evidence. What was in it? What did it reveal? Alexander Kolovatov, his body was well insulated, wearing 2 shirts, 2 sweaters, and a ski jacket. Yet his ski jacket was unbuttoned and unzipped. Why? Parts of his trousers and waistband were radioactive. How did he come into contact with radiation in the middle of the Ural Mountains? His nose was broken, his neck deformed, and an open wound was found behind his ear. Yet the autopsy remained silent on the nature of his injuries. Despite his severe trauma, there were no signs of an external struggle. Did he fall? Or was something far more sinister at play? Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, one of the most mysteriously injured members of the Dyatlov group. His body was well protected, wearing a woolen hat, 2 shirts, wool sweaters, a fur jacket, gloves, socks, and Valenki boots. He and Semyon Zolotaryov were already outside when disaster struck. But the most disturbing part? A deep, depressed, multi-splintered skull fracture. The autopsy confirmed that an accidental fall was not the cause. There was no damage to soft tissue, meaning this force was unlike anything from a simple impact. He couldn't have been hit by a rock in someone's hand. After the injury, he would have been unable to move, yet he may have shown signs of life for 2 to 3 hours. What happened in those final moments? Was he a victim of an unknown force, or something even more unexplainable? The facts are chilling. Crushed bones, missing body parts, radiation, and a desperate escape into the freezing night. Why did they run? What force left them with injuries no human should survive? Was it nature? A military cover-up? Something inhuman? The facts end here, but the theories begin. The night of the incident, multiple witnesses reported seeing glowing orbs of light hovering over the mountains. Were these UFOs, military experiments, or something even stranger? One theory suggests that the hikers poisoned themselves, not from an external threat, but from within their own tent. Could carbon monoxide poisoning have caused disorientation, hallucinations, and a desperate escape into the freezing night? The bodies of 2 hikers were found with radioactive clothing. But why? Was there a nuclear test gone wrong? Or were the hikers unknowingly exposed to something deadly? A natural but deadly phenomenon called catalytic winds could have created extreme pressure, enough to cause internal injuries with no external wounds. Some speculate the hikers may have angered the local Mansi tribe and paid the ultimate price. What if the Dyatlov group encountered a Yeti, a mysterious predator? Could a starving bear have entered their camp, forcing them to run for their lives? Was something else watching from above? Could an unidentified craft have startled the hikers? Were they abducted and experimented on? Could a powerful infrasound wave have caused mass hysteria, forcing the hikers to flee their tent in confusion and terror? Could the shockwave and radiation from a secret weapons test explain their bizarre injuries? Or were the Starks always right? Did winter finally come, bringing death, and the real inspiration behind White Walkers have been hidden in the Urals all along? The official report blames an avalanche, a sudden collapse of snow, forcing the hikers to flee half-dressed. Do you believe the avalanche theory? Or is there something they're not telling us? Comment below, hit like, and subscribe, because the truth is still buried in the snow.